I think without stopping to like listen to each stakeholder's needs, it's not always black and white. I think a lot of people want data centers to be black and white. It's good or it's bad or, it's not that simple. So I think really stopping to listen to each stakeholder's needs and how can you design a project that sort of meets everyone's needs. I'm an optimist, so I feel like that can happen. We just need to make it happen.
Welcome to the Make Water Work podcast, where we dive into the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of water. I'm your host, Isaac Pellerin, and alongside my co-host, Megan Glover, the founder of 120 Water, we bring you insights from hundreds of incredible conversations we've had over the past 9 years with inspiring and energizing leaders in the water industry. Each week, we share those stories and conversations with entrepreneurs, community champions, and innovators who are making water work for everyone. Whether you're a water professional, a curious innovator, or simply passionate about our most precious resource, this podcast is for you. Let's get started.
Well, hello and welcome everyone today to the Make Water Work podcast, where we are celebrating those who are working and serving in the water industry. So Isaac, who do we have today?
So today we are talking with Michelle Stockness, who's just an incredible leader and has just paved the way in a lot of ways. And I've had the opportunity to meet her in a handful of contexts. At one point, it was at a brewery in Minnesota for a water technology event. And Minnesota has a great landscape. And so Michelle has had 20 years of local, regional, and national leadership on the water side. So Michelle, welcome to the Make Water Work podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed, we interacted at a handful of conferences, finally got to have a conversation when I went up to that event in Minnesota. And then, but really just want to start the podcast by saying everyone has a story about how water found them. So Michelle, tell us your story about how water found you.
Yeah, I'd love to. I maybe have a similar story to some people. Like, I was good at math and science in school. And so my dad's like, you should be an engineer. And I remember walking through college campuses and I was like, oh no, this looks so boring. Like, I never want to do this job. And then I was like, well, I'll just enroll in undergrad and do this, and I'll probably switch out into something more fun and cool. And I liked the environment. I liked being outside, and I was good at math and science, but those didn't seem to go together in my brain. And then I had a wastewater class and I loved it. And I was like, oh, this is maybe what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I graduated with a civil engineering degree with an environmental emphasis. That was like new back when I graduated, the environmental part. And then I worked for consultants. I started as a design engineer doing city drinking water systems, city wastewater systems, and then industrial water and wastewater systems. Those don't usually go together, but that's been my experience. So heavy industry in cities, and kind of worked from being like a nerdy design engineer, doing plans and specs, to being on site a lot, running projects, up through the vice president role at consulting firms, which I loved. I like that variety. And then also I think I always say yes to things and want to help people. And so I've done a lot of volunteer roles. And I, was voluntold to join AWWA. I joined WEF. I joined all those professional associations. And I really like that. And I like the leadership that taught me and the people I got to know, and worked my way up to being on the AWWA board nationally as a vice president and director. And that was wonderful. And I realized I like sort of this public engagement and policy sort of side of things. I never really had any training in, but I really felt like that was a need. And then I got asked to come to Freshwater and work at a nonprofit, which is this job I love. And I never thought that this would be the job I love, going from like a design nerd to a sort of public speaker and somebody that does more public engagement. But yeah, so that's my story. It looks, when I look backwards, it makes a lot of sense. Like, those community groups that I was with or technical work all really informs the work I do today. But as it went through, it was really roundabout and didn't seem to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things that I, when I think back, my perception of you before we actually really got to meet was like, I knew your role at AWWA, but you would spend time at ACE meeting those of us who had new solutions in the market, who were like saying, hey, there's always those people that make you feel like, hey, you're at home here, and we're embracing innovation, and we're and we want to help connect the dots and help see where these things have and so I've just kind of always seen you as one of those people that's like willing to make us feel welcome in the industry,
and a connector too. Like to your point, Michelle, again, AWWA ACE is where we first met the first time, and I'm like, oh yeah, she absolutely gets it. And I think it's because now, like, kind of hearing your background, you've walked a day in the life, like you've been the boots on the ground, so you know what it actually takes to get stuff done. You had an interest in the policy, so you know kind of the mandates that are coming, and you really are a bridge builder or connector. Okay, how do we actually get it done? And who do we need to collaborate with? Who are the stakeholders that we need to bring to the table? What message do we need? And we were talking a little bit in the pre-show about this, and can you maybe just touch on that aspect a bit of how collaboration in that aspect has kind of been integral to your career and being successful?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things we can do better as a water industry is collaborate better and communicate better. And I think I have that sort of big picture view from my career path with working with community groups. It's like, I just don't understand what you're saying, and I don't trust this information I get. Or industry saying like, why won't people partner with me? Why is it so confusing? We feel like we can't keep up. Or local government, or, everybody has sort of a different perspective. And by working across all those groups, I realized that like, actually there's a lot of shared goals and shared information that people want, but we need to translate it in different ways. Like the engineering way I was taught was like heavy acronyms, show some graphs, make people think you're really smart. But then nobody understands that, right? So we need to sort of translate and find alignment. And there's a ton of alignment across sectors. We just need to build it, and maybe it's something that we don't traditionally have. So I think that's one of the biggest ways we can do is communicate, translate, and collaborate sort of outside of our own organization and go bigger.
Yeah. Where do you see some of those opportunities for more cross, whether it's water, drinking water, storm, or industrial, like, or any other aspect of more collaboration? Where do you see that?
Yeah, maybe I'll share a few things that, we're doing at Freshwater.
Please, yes.
And we're, a nonprofit. We work on water research, water policy, and a lot of community education and engagement. And some things we're doing in a really collaborative space are around workforce. So we're trying to, work with utilities, technical colleges, universities, private businesses, state government, and actual workforce professionals. That's the key part on workforce strategies. And I think that's a really great example of, we have a network of like 50 people from across the state that are all trying to do workforce, and we're all kind of trying to do it in our own little group and not doing great at it, to be honest. We weren't trained as workforce people. But when we all got together, we realized we have a lot of shared goals and strategies, and we have a lot of tools that we can share. Like, here's an apprenticeship program, here's a tour guide program, here's a way I try to get students in. And so we didn't actually create any new tools. We just shared them across the group, which blew my mind. I was ready to make stuff, and I'm like, oh, we're just sharing stuff and communicating. So maybe that's one example. I think workforce, I think funding, having talking points with elected officials about funding and actual funding needs, and kind of sharing that across different infrastructure groups at a state level, at a national level, is really important. And then I think a lot of, the economic development, that's a big thing in Minnesota right now. Data centers, large volume water users are coming in. And that means economic development, water people, community members, business. Like, if you all communicate well, those projects can be sited well and designed well and have a lot of community benefits and economic benefits. But if you kind of miss some of those collaboration steps, they get a lot harder. So
absolutely.
That's a few examples.
Yeah. Freshwater, I'm going to take us back a little bit. Can you just give an overview of Freshwater? Because, what you guys are doing is such important work. And I'm wondering, why doesn't every state have have a U, Michelle? Can you give us a flyover of Freshwater? When did it start? I think
maybe every state should have a freshwater, but I think it's important to understand that Minnesota's like state of water sort of in our background of our brains, right? We're the land of 10,000 lakes.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
We're the headwaters of the Mississippi. Like we all really care about water, sort of whether people know it or not. It's sort of like in our blood. And so we were founded in 1968 as a biological research institute. Then we kind of moved into a foundation, and then we moved into a nonprofit. But where we are today is we work on water research projects. So supporting research that meets community needs and that is like informs practical solutions. We support water policy, that's especially policy that's grounded in science and community priorities. And we work a lot in capacity and engagement building. So whether that's community engagement, tribal engagement, water workforce capacity as people, or, learning opportunities. But we think that's a real gap.
Yes.
And what Freshwater tries to do as a 501c3 nonprofit is to be a great partner, support people in their work in water, but also look for the gaps and maybe what needs more help and what's not getting done, and how can we push on those areas. Nonprofits can do things that government can't, that businesses can't, that community groups can't, and we try to work across all of those sectors. And I think that's the key part about Freshwater Society is that we work cross sectors.
Yes.
Community,
Huge.
public, private, business, the media, educational institutions, elected officials, and sort of try to translate and align across those groups to get things done. And we have a lot of shared goals in common.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's that glue, right? It's that knowing or seeking to understand what stakeholders need to be at the table to actually get stuff done. And that's, I mean, how I see, your superpower and even Freshwater, and for a state that can be so impactful when you're thinking about macro issues like workforce, like economic development. Like we all win when we have the right people at the table to make sure that we're working on, we're deploying the existing tools in a more effective way. We're focused on the right issues. And so I just think it's a really cool concept, and glad you're in that role.
Yeah. I would love to get your perspective. You mentioned the word that I hear a lot lately, data centers. And I feel like it's becoming a hot topic, a polarized topic, for a lot of different reasons, but in the spirit of collaboration and communication, I would love kind of your perspective on whether it's the dynamics there in Minnesota, or just some of the ways that we can think about having a constructive conversation about the role of data centers.
Yeah, I think data centers is definitely the hot topic. It's like my new PFAS is what I like to say. Everybody everywhere wants to talk about it with you if they know you work in water. So it's sort of fascinating. But on one hand, the sort of urgency of it and newness of it is driving a lot of conversations that I think we've been waiting to have, and a lot of understanding that we've been waiting to have. So we think data centers are coming. They're coming to Minnesota, but we want them to be sited in a place that makes sense for long-term water supply. And we want to make sure they have smart design, as efficient as possible, water circularity, do those co-locations with other facilities. So that smart design, green infrastructure. And then we also want to see community engagement happen more in those projects. So that's what we're trying to do, is kind of work across sectors. We hear from community groups that they're really worried about them. They're scared of them. They don't want them. Who's in charge of them, and who can they talk to about it? So we kind of help them understand the development process and how they can engage, and permitting processes in the state and regionally. We help utilities understand what can you ask for as part of the development. What are water concepts to consider? Have you thought about a green roof? Have you thought about wastewater reuse? Have you thought about what will happen if you use a lot of groundwater and that's not available for drinking water, things like that. We've also talked to government from the local to the state level. What's their role? How are they going to engage? Government and development move very differently. There's different speeds. So I think that's a lot of the conflict lately. And then also helping businesses understand what's, in Minnesota, what's our processes, what are the permitting processes, who are good stakeholders to engage with. So I think there's a lot of translation and coordination, and also with elected officials. But if you look at it, it's a real opportunity to have, for projects, if they're done well, can have economic benefits, but they also can have community benefits and ecological benefits too. But if we can slow it down enough to think about those things in the beginning, that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah.
We could not agree more. And so, I'm curious, like, what is the ideal stakeholder group? Like, if you're designing your table, like, who are the heads that you want at that table to, like, create a model of good? Because I do think it's a lot of bottoms up right now that we're seeing, and that's not working, right? So I would love your thoughts on, if you could design a table of stakeholders, who do you think needs to be at that table?
Yeah, I think, what we're really recommending at Freshwater is sort of like regional planning. Like, who else is in your region that might be affected by this? Is it community groups? Do you have regional water planners? Maybe you don't even have regional water planners, but, other economic development teams, water teams. If only economic development would get the water people to the table a lot earlier than like after the agreement signed, that would be wonderful. So economic development and water talking earlier, a lot earlier. Community groups sort of want to know what's going on, what type of business is it. I think watershed groups, soil and water conservation districts, whoever the like sort of watershed group is in the region is really important. And then state government has a lot of resources available too. And, they might have permitting roles, but they might just have information about unintended consequences or private well users in the area, trout streams, things like that might be helpful for businesses citing. So I think it's sort of taking a little bit more time in that due diligence and stakeholder engagement phase in the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. Could not agree more.
Yeah. And I feel like it keeps highlighting a lot of the conversation I hear around, in my neighborhood groups and those kind of things, is that I think it's highlighting that people are realizing how much power it takes to move water, because the relationship between water and power, and what is like a lot of it right now, for me locally, is what does this do to our electric bill?
Yeah, true.
But it's also a like, hey, water is heavy. It takes a lot to process it, to use it for a specific thing, for this application. And then it's also somewhat, I think that like the wisdom in saying we need to slow down and have some of the right conversations, because there's a difference between building the infrastructure and then the policy of how the infrastructure gets used. And so there's, somewhat similar to lead or PFAS. There's like a little bit of like which is probably what you were getting at earlier. There's a little bit of like, but this is AI and it's my data, and who's this? Like there's a whole lot of
noise
in our brains that's separating like, here's what we need to build, here are all the applications for it, and we also need smart policy to help govern how we decide to apply it in our communities.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It's a fascinating conversation. I could talk about it all day, because it's kind of like
it is. It's the news du jour.
Yeah,
it really is. It's the thing du jour,
and it's a good civics lesson. And I'm like, I think it does create an opportunity for us to actually have really good conversations. Like, so let's have them.
We agree. And I think really, what we try to do is be like a trusted advisor role to all those different groups, help understand their needs, listen to their concerns, direct them other places to other resources that might exist or people to talk to. But I think without stopping to like listen to each stakeholder's needs, it's not always black and white. I think a lot of people want data centers to be black and white. It's good or it's bad, or, it's not that simple. So I think really stopping to listen to each stakeholder's needs and how can you design a project that sort of meets everyone's needs. That's I'm an optimist, so I feel like that.
Yeah.
Same.
We just need to make it happen.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and to Megan's point, I think there's, it would be great to have more of freshwater DNA spread across in other states, because I could see how we would benefit from that.
Just take a beat to listen, and then come up with the solution that benefits all parties. And I think as water folks, we also have the advantage of knowing a little bit more about what's possible. And therefore, I do think maybe this is why we're kind of hung up on this in the moment. Like, we feel a little bit, it's our responsibility to pay it forward and be like, no, slow down. I understand that maybe the centers aren't communicating this correctly to you all, but let me kind of provide an alternative approach to why this may be a good thing. Their approach may be off, but I just feel like because we have the knowledge and we know what's possible, there is a little bit of like, let's maybe try to be part of the solution and figure out how we make this a win-win for everybody. So.
Yeah, it's really not an engineering problem from my standpoint. We have like great design tools and siting tools, and the engineering exists. We just need to sort of communicate and sort of design the projects in a way that can have benefits for everybody. So, and I totally think that's possible.
I do. Yeah, we share that. So let's stay on this creative design theme, because one of the other things we were talking about is infrastructure, critical infrastructure. Let's even double click down to lead service line replacement. We all live in leaded states. So we know these are massive problems facing our communities over the next decades or such. And one of the things you mentioned that you touch on is funding, right? What is your take on how are we going to fund the investment in kind of replacing and repairing this infrastructure?
Yeah, I wish I had a great answer for we have
Darn it.
solved that problem, right? But that's the number one thing we hear from all of our partners is worries about funding. I think from the local government level, it's like, can we rely on federal funding? Minnesota as a state is facing a deficit for the first time in a long time. And so we feel like there's not a lot of state money. We don't know what's happening with federal money, and we can't raise rates indefinitely, right? So there's affordability worries. So I really do think this is the time to sort of, what we're trying to do as a state with partners is try to think of like, all right, those old ways that we used to just count on federal funding or know we could apply to a state fund or PFA and we get money. I think we had record numbers of applicants to the state revolving fund this year too, which is like, great that everyone's trying to use it, but there's just not enough money for everyone. So I think we're really trying to encourage people to, first of all, like communicate their actual needs so that we know like what is the full picture of our needs as a state or region nationally. I mean, I think that's one of the questions we get a lot from elected officials. And then I think we have to be more creative about funding strategies. And unless we're just hoping that something will go back to the way it used to be, which I think is not very realistic.
Hope is not a strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're really trying to work with, I lead the Minnesota Infrastructure Alliance, and that's all the infrastructure groups. We share talking points. We share strategies. We're going to try this year. Let's develop these 5 talking points about infrastructure needs and funding. So I think it's communicating together in a loud voice and having the same talking points at a state or federal level. And then I think it's also like being more creative about funding strategies. Like we have something in Minnesota called the Legacy Amendment and the Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund. It's a ballot measure that we just reauthorized it last year, but it passed by 77% saying we want to fund outdoors and the environment projects in Minnesota. And so I saw Texas did something similar with a water fund.
Yeah.
Like, we have to think of new strategies, whether people like it or not. This is the time to be really creative and who can you speak with? What other partners haven't we talked to that also benefit from infrastructure funding? It's quality of life, it's economic development, it's jobs. How can you bring those partners with? So last year at the state capitol, we had business partners and local government partners both talking together about how we needed more capital investment and infrastructure funding. So I think it's sort of finding new partnerships, maybe some new messengers, and really thinking about different and creative strategies for funding.
Yeah. I couldn't. The messenger thing resonates too, because back to the communication, you can't expect that anybody is advocating. You can't just assume that someone's advocating for more state funding for infrastructure programs. If anyone spent like a day in their local legislature, I mean, it's dog eat dog, right? And so like, unless you know who exactly is advocating for those things, you can't assume it's being done, in my experience. And so I think that like that different messengers, the different coalitions, like getting different voices in the room to expose the importance of this, I think is spot on. And be more creative. Like the tools that exist today aren't going to be the tools that actually get the job done.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, I agree. And I know a lot of like water utility people hate this stuff. They hate doing this stuff, but I think it is all part of our job to do a little bit of it. One of my friends at utility here said, like, I would rather clean out a sludge tank than go to the Capitol and ask for funding. And I was like, all right, well, who else from your organization can come up with me and talk about it, right? So I think it is all of our jobs to make it more visible. We hear from elected officials that they don't hear about infrastructure enough. Or didn't we give you a lot of money? Isn't that enough? Didn't the federal government give you a lot of money? So I think there's just a lack of awareness and understanding. And the more we can make that about real humans and real communities and real jobs, that really goes a long way.
Yeah.
I've been seeing as I do some dabbling in surveying across asset management plans and just seeing how some of the some standardization of asset management plans, critical infrastructure, and how they're valuing that. As I look at those one of those things that I'm thinking about is like, how is it that we can better communicate that even when we get millions of dollars from the federal government, here's what we actually need. Like it's getting this much, and it's not just coming from an advocacy group necessarily, but it's coming from the data of the utilities. Like it's
we need better data. It's like,
we need better standardized data, easier to understand, so that an elected official or a governor can be like, if you add up all of the critical infrastructure, that if this failed, it would be bad. Here's how much we need. Do we have enough? That's why we're saying we need more. It would help keep it top of mind.
Absolutely.
And I think other industries like power kind of does that already. Like water could learn a lot from the way power organizes and communicates needs and larger picture scales and things like that. It's more, different regulations and stuff. But that's a common question we get, whether it's funding or workforce. Like, well, for funding, how much money is needed where and in which communities? And I'm like, well, I don't have that. A lot, you'd have to, I can get you individual stories, but like the whole state or regional picture is really hard to come by, even though we know that data exists locally. And I think workforce is the same way, like which jobs are needed where and what training. And I'm like, well, we also don't have a roll up of that too. A lot of jobs. But I think we need to tell a better story and sort of roll it up a little bit better. So speaking of you're the optimist. So let's flip that and say, what if you could say, if we could get better about XYZ data that we can collect, it would solve, like, what do you think would unlock some of those barriers with regards to workforce and funding for all of these aging assets? Yeah, I think I think this is a solvable problem. But first of all, I think we just need to dedicate somebody to do it. Like, having a workforce strategy consultant in your own organization would be really helpful. I think we've all been doing workforce as like somebody's little side volunteer job for like 1 hour a month, and that's just really not cutting it. So I think having like dedicated people to workforce would be really helpful. And also that data of, I know other regions have done this, maybe in California, Illinois, like looking at like what jobs are available where and what training is there, because we have wonderful jobs. Like we met with a workforce consultant at the state, and she has my favorite quote. We talked about, all these different jobs are available from GHD to PhD. And she was like, these are so great. They're mission driven. They protect the environment. They help communities. She's like, I never knew these existed. And I was like, exactly. You don't know they exist. So like, how can we get anybody into them? So I think with us all doing a little bit for workforce, visiting a school, hosting a tour, building an apprenticeship program, that would really help. And these are like proven strategies. We just don't communicate them or maybe allocate time and budget in our organization to helping with them. So, but I think water careers, and especially water in general, is one of the few things that everyone thinks is important right now in this era of like high polarization. I feel like water and like sports teams are maybe the only things in a region that everybody sort of can get behind regardless of your differences. So let's use that.
I love that. I love it. It really is. It really is. And they're good jobs too. They're good lifelong careers. It's just we don't have enough exposure on those pathways and what opportunities exist. I love that. I love that. I love that. So what do you think, what's next for Freshwater? So if you think about, your priorities for 2026, what's next? What are you focused on? How can the water sector help? How can the podcast help?
Yeah, I think, we're looking for sort of gaps in what we think needs more help. And we have 3 main focus areas. The first one is safe and clean water for all communities, especially rural, tribal, and communities of color. So right now that means workforce capacity building. It means building local champions across the state and everywhere. And it means access to funding and funding across the state. So that's a big one for us. Groundwater sustainability is a big one for us. Minnesota uses groundwater as the majority of our water supply. So looking at how we're using groundwater, how can we build circularity into those strategies? That's a big focus for us. And so we're kind of weaving that into the research, the policy work, the education work we do sort of across sectors and hope that we can get something out of that. But those are the areas we think that need the most help.
Yeah.
A lot of everybody, especially rural communities, I think need a lot of help, whether that's private wells, infrastructure funding, things like that. There's a lot of water concerns in rural communities and affordability. So we'd love to look at affordability programs for the state, see what we can do around that. We have some affordability studies going on with other communities. So we're really trying to make sure everyone has access to safe and clean water across the state.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Michelle, I always enjoy getting to have conversations with you. It is inspiring. Your optimism is infectious. And we really do appreciate the role that you have in this industry and just kind of charting a path for folks to get involved.
Yeah.
And so, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, I think Freshwater's website is a great resource. We have a blog you can subscribe to. I try to put as much stuff on LinkedIn as I can. That's maybe my best businessy way to find me. But really, I'd love to talk to people at events, at conferences. Like, come find me. Like, I feel like my job is to talk with all of you, hear what's going on, how we can help, or how I can connect you with someone else who can help you. There's wonderful people working in water and other people that would be great for us to collaborate more with. And I'd love to help everybody do that better.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Michelle. It's great to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
Well, it was really amazing to talk to Michelle, and she's got such a winding kind of career path into where she is today as executive director of Freshwater. And it's just really been fun to see how all of those kind of weave together to do what she's doing. And I think my takeaway of where she is now, and I think, what I think more states need to aspire to replicate is this position of collaboration around major issues that involve water stakeholders.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it's workforce, funding, infrastructure, like all of those things take collaboration and water stakeholders at the table. And it seems like Freshwater is kind of solving that recipe.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
She has such a good assertiveness to saying, hey, water deserves to be in this conversation. Let's make sure we're not being underrepresented and just doing that, bringing the right stakeholders around the table. And I think we need so much more of that.
Absolutely.
To really address the individual needs of our states.
I know. And I'm excited to see some of the innovative stuff they're coming up with too. So maybe there'll be a follow on to see what are some things that they're bringing to life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so fun to get to have conversations
really
with folks like Michelle. And thank you so much for tuning in to this conversation on the Make Water Work podcast. Please like, subscribe, share, and let us know who you want to hear from. And we can't wait to have you join us next time on the Make Water Work podcast. Thanks for listening to the Make Water Work podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. Connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a message. Together, we can make water work for everyone.